Welcome to the Low Law Podcast, Justice in West Texas.
Welcome back to the Low Law Podcast, Justice in West Texas, with attorney Tara Gilmore-Low, founder of the Low Law Firm in Abilene. Tara has spent more than 20 years helping injured West Texans and families facing some of the toughest moments of their lives. My name is Kevin Rosenquist, and today we're going to talk about truck and commercial vehicle crashes and why they're never just another wreck. Tara, welcome back.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you.
I didn't scare you away in the first episode, so we're off to a great start. Not so far. All right. Well, for people who've only experienced regular car accidents, what you call, I guess, a regular car accident, what makes a crash involving an 18-wheeler or a commercial vehicle completely different right out of the gate?
There's a number of things, but the first absolute foremost thing is the size and weight disparity. When you're hit by a tractor trailer, the combined empty weight of a tractor trailer is 35,000 pounds. Average vehicle size or average vehicle weight, roughly 400 to 4,500 pounds. So right out of the gate, the biggest problem is the size and weight disparity. A loaded tractor trailer is going to be 80,000 pounds. Wow. So that's the very first thing. As it continues, the differences between the two are massive. You have everything is different from the adjusters, from the investigators, from the way the claim is worked from the beginning. I will have people go out and get evidence immediately with a tractor trailer case, whereas with a car wreck case, that's not always feasible. The lawyers are different. They're more skilled at dealing with these tractor trailer cases. So there's a lot of differences, but to answer your question, the very first big difference is the size and weight disparity, which leads to differences in injuries, differences in damage, things like that.
On our previous episode, we talked a lot about adjusters and tactics and phone calls and all of that stuff. When a trucking company's insurance adjuster reaches out quickly after a wreck, do they handle this differently? Is there something additionally that someone should keep in mind before answering any questions?
They should not answer any questions. And if I could scream it from the rooftops, I will say in a commercial vehicle accident or a tractor trailer case, you do not talk to that adjuster. Because again, the premise is the same. The adjuster or whoever is handling for that trucking company is not there to help you. They are there to help themselves and their company. And that can be truly devastating in some of these cases if you're volunteering information that's unnecessary. I've had some people just get so mad at the adjusters right off the bat that it creates problems. So again, just don't talk to them. Just call one of us, preferably call me, okay? But don't talk to them. They're not there to help you, and they're not going to stroke you a check right away. They're just not, and you don't want them to. And call me and I'll tell you why.
Yeah. I think we talked in the last episode about it's our natural reaction to be, courteous or answer questions or try to be helpful, but there's a lot at stake here, and there's a lot of different moving pieces. So it's better just to say nothing.
It is.
And just move on.
It is. And I'm a lot more firm about that on a commercial motor vehicle accident case than I am on a person-to-person car wreck, because it's different. I cannot stress enough how much someone should not be communicating with them after that accident. So it's different. It's just different.
Yeah, it's a different animal.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell. So obviously, a lot of these truck crashes are going to happen on highways, and on highways, evidence disappears fast.
Mm-hmm.
What steps can someone take early on to preserve what's needed for a strong case?
So again, if you're able, and this is even less likely in an 18-wheeler accident, but if you are able, video and pictures and names of witnesses. One of my clients who he was able to move around at the scene of the accident. He did have pretty bad injuries, but it was one of those spinal injuries that we dealt with later. He was able to get very good photographic evidence of the placement of the truck and his vehicle. And it later became very important when they were fighting liability about where that truck was versus where that line on that highway was. So those pictures can be very, very helpful. Again, if there's witnesses, get the witness information. Again, all of this is subject to your injuries. Your injuries come first. But it can be very helpful. And the other thing that I will stress is you really need to call a lawyer quickly. Most personal injury lawyers who handle trucking accidents have a team of people that can start gathering evidence immediately. I can't tell you how many times I've had to send one of my truck investigators out to the scene within hours. There's a lot of evidence that erodes and a lot that can be gathered very, very quickly. So really talk to someone quick. These are a whole different animal, these types of cases.
So other than pictures of the scene like that someone could take on their phone, talking to witnesses or the police, what kind of evidence do you and your team try to look for early on in a case like this?
So some of this, Kevin, we don't want to share. Okay. So
no trade secrets, no secrets.
Some of the things that we want to look for, the first things that we're going to do is we're going to do everything we can to secure that truck. We're going to do everything we can to secure that vehicle. We're going to start looking into that driver and that company. There's a lot of stuff like that. Now, on scene evidence would be skid marks, if there are any, dirt turned up, depending on what type of accident that it was. We've had some accidents where they've taken out guardrails. So we want pictures of all of that. We want to match paint scrapings, things like that, tire marks, all of that. That's all stuff that's done on scene. But there's a lot of background work that's also done in a commercial motor vehicle accident that you're not going to necessarily see in a person-to-person car wreck. So
obviously cameras are all over the place nowadays, between dash cams and business cams and all that stuff, highway cams. How impactful is the video evidence that we are able to obtain these days?
It's very impactful, and that works both ways.
Sure. Yeah.
I actually had a case last year that we got pretty heavy into litigation, and they produced a video that they claimed they didn't have the whole time. As it turns out, the truck was in fact equipped with a camera, and that camera recorded my client crossing the line and hitting the truck versus the truck crossing the line and hitting my client. So it happens. So the video footage is fantastic. I've also had that happen in the reverse. So like I said, it works both ways, but the video footage that we've got now is great. The police officers' body cams, whenever they go, is very impactful. And we get a lot of information from that. And most trucks now, you're going to be hard pressed to find a truck that's not covered in cameras. So yeah, we usually have pretty good information.
Yeah, I've heard they even have them like inside the cab now, right?
They do. Yeah, most of the companies, they do. Yes.
And is that just to make sure people aren't on their phones and stuff like that, or is that the reason that most of them do that?
So the trucking companies won't admit this, and we've tried to get them to. Basically, yeah, they are doing it to protect themselves. They're watching that driver to make sure that driver is, not doing drugs, not on his cell phone, not asleep, not doing a whole bunch of things, and that he's driving when he's supposed to be. Now, it works to our advantage as well, because we get to see what they're doing and what they've been doing in the time leading up to the accident. So it helps all parties. But yeah, the trucking companies do it for themselves. They're all about saving money.
For commercial vehicles, how much does it matter what company owned the truck, who was driving it, whether they were on the job at the time? How much does this impact a case?
So who owned the truck may not impact the case all that much, though it can, I guess it can have some venue or jurisdictional issues, but it's not so much about who owned the truck versus if that truck, the driver is working for that company, that can make things a little bit smoother, but it's really about identifying all of those potential defendants. The other thing is, and unfortunately we've had this happen a lot too, is you do want to make sure that there is a company who owns that truck. We're in West Texas. You're going to see some unmarks traveling that highway quite a bit. And, I had one a year, 2 years ago. The driver just stopped, made sure nobody was dead, and took off. He didn't speak any English, and he didn't have any markings on his truck. And that's a huge issue, because you may not have anyone that you can go after to recoup money for the injuries that you've probably had in this accident. So it's not so much about who owns it, it's just that someone owns it that is, carrying coverage and complying with the law, or is a company that is able to satisfy any sort of judgment or claim against, for injuries. The driver, you do want to make sure, you have independence, but they're covered by the truck driving company most of the time. And so that's another thing that you want to look to and make sure that they're, that they are working for the company and they haven't stolen the truck. I personally have never dealt with that. Some have, I think. So that's kind of what you're looking at when it comes to that stuff. But really what's important to that question is identifying all of those possible defendants. And usually it's going to be the trucking company, the driver, maybe broker, maybe a loader, shipper, something like that.
Yeah, that's a lot. I can see why these cases are so much more, difficult or vast. There's so many more things to do. How do you figure out who should be held liable? I mean, you're talking about, the driver, the trucking company. You could talk maintenance. You could talk, like you said, the loader. Like, there's a lot of stuff there. How do you go through and figure out what's what there?
So a lot of that is gathered through, some of it you can eyeball, you can see what's going on and see what type of truck it was, what type of load they were probably carrying. If you're talking about Tyson, chances are all they're carrying is products for Tyson. Okay. But if you're talking about something, just a basic trucking company, they could be hauling a load for any number of companies or a number of companies, and you don't know who loaded that truck. Chances are it's an employee of the trucking company, but it's not. Oftentimes it's a shipper. Where do we get the information? If we can't eyeball it for sure, a lot of it comes from discovery. A lot of it will come from the records that we get in discovery after we, once we've received that information and reviewed it, we may identify additional potential defendants, which is the other reason it's imperative that you talk to a lawyer quickly. These cases generally have to get filed pretty fast if there's a question of who all could be liable. Mm-hmm. Texas law has changed a lot in the last few years. So there's a few different ways you have to handle things to try and keep that trucking company in, but there's a lot more stuff to look at. And if you only have 2 years to bring that lawsuit or settle that case. And so that's not a lot of time. I know it sounds like a lot of time, but it's really not a lot of time in the grand scheme of things.
The fact that we just got through Thanksgiving this year, and I can't believe it. We're already past Thanksgiving. No, time goes real fast. So
yeah,
it does. I totally understand how that could be something that people need to keep in mind. That 2-year statute of limitations is important.
It is. Well, and a lot of people when you're in it, you don't realize how much time is going by, especially when you're dealing with a brain injury or a spinal injury or multiple surgeries and the healing. You can be 6-8 months in after the accident and you're still dealing with the injuries, and you just woke up and it's been 8 months. So yes, that time can go really quickly and you don't even realize it. So,
we were talking just a second ago about all the different parties that can be involved. Does it end up being a lot of finger pointing on their end, trying to shift blame to each other?
1,000%. Yeah. Absolutely. Everyone is going to try to minimize their exposure or their liability or their risk in front of a jury. That is absolutely what they're going to do. And they'll all have contracts between them, that are largely going to define who's liable for what and how. But yes, to answer your question, yes, they absolutely point the finger at each other. So again, it kind of goes back to that. You get with someone soon because there's a lot. It's very complex. The layers of coverage are complex. Yeah. The layers of liability are complex, and the actors are complex. So,
do these typically get settled? Or do they often? How often do they go to litigation?
So that depends. Most of these are going to settle. If if they aren't settling, there's generally a good reason why. And that could be, generally, there's a huge dispute as to the amount of damages that are owed. Occasionally, the big fight is over liability, and somebody wants a jury to determine that. But most of the time, the fight is over how much the defendant or defendants owes the plaintiff for damages. If there is no way to get those parties together and get that worked out, that's when that case ends up at trial. Most of the time, though, they are resolved without a trial. If they weren't, we would have a court system so backed up, we wouldn't even know. We already do. But if we weren't able to resolve a lot of these without trial, we wouldn't get anywhere. We would just, everything would be at a standstill. So,
especially with how complex these cases are and how long they take. I mean, I imagine that the actual trial for a trucking case would be probably more intense than a trial for a vehicle to vehicle.
Absolutely. We bear the plaintiff has a burden of proof, and you have to prove that burden against each potential named defendant. So it can get in credit. And that is just as to the liability. That's before you even get to damages. You then have to prove up those damages, and that's going to eat up a lot of your time as well. So yes, those trials get a lot more, they get a lot more complicated.
Well, interesting stuff for sure. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of the Low Law Podcast, Justice in West Texas. If you've been involved in a crash with an 18-wheeler, a company truck, or any commercial vehicle, Tara and her team are here to help you understand your options and protect your rights. Visit lowlawfirm.com to learn more. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss an episode. Leave us a review. We very much appreciate it. Tara, it was great having you here today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. It was nice to be with you too.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.